The transport shuttle carrying Ambassador David Kane descended through layers of impossible architecture. Massive rings of crystallized starlight rotated in opposite directions, each one large enough to hold Earth's moon. Between them floated platforms supporting structures that defied physics, buildings that bent space around themselves, creating rooms larger inside than their exteriors could contain. This was Nexus Prime, heart of the Galactic Council, home to representatives from 947 sentient species. And David was about to walk into its central chamber, knowing that every single one of those species wanted humanity gone. The shuttle pilot, a nervous young officer named Collins, kept glancing back at David. "Sir," the briefing said, "this is a formal accusation. They're not even pretending this is a standard diplomatic session." I read the briefing. Collins. David straightened his uniform. The simple gray suit looking pathetically plain compared to the exotic materials and living garments he'd seen on other species. "Just get me there on time?" "On time for what, sir?" "Our own execution?" David didn't answer because he didn't have a good response. 3 weeks ago, Earth's colonial survey teams had discovered something in the outer reaches. Something that every species in the galaxy apparently knew about and had deliberately hidden from humanity. And now the Council wanted answers about how much Earth knew and what humanity planned to do with that knowledge. The problem was that David genuinely didn't know what they'd found. The survey data had been classified above his clearance level. He was walking into this confrontation completely blind. The shuttle docked at a platform that extended from the Council chamber itself. Through the viewports, David could see the chamber's exterior, a sphere of transparent material that showed the swirling chaos of dimensional space beyond. The Council met at the intersection of 12 different realities, a location that required constant stabilization fields to prevent the entire structure from collapsing into quantum uncertainty. "Good luck?" "Sir," Collins said as David stepped toward the airlock. "Luck has nothing to do with it," David replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The airlock opened directly into the Council chamber's visitor entrance. David stepped through and immediately felt the weight of nearly 1,000 alien minds focusing on him. The chamber was enormous, stretching upward into impossible distances. Seating arrangements spiraled around a central platform, each level representing different tiers of Council membership. The oldest and most powerful species occupied the highest tiers, looking down on newer civilizations with the casual disregard of immortals. Observing insects, David walked toward the central platform, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Every conversation had stopped the moment he entered. Every eye sensor and perception organ tracked his movement. He reached the platform and stood at its center, looking up at the assembled Council. The lighting made it difficult to see the highest tiers clearly, but he could make out the general shapes. Some were humanoid, others resembled geometric configurations or energy patterns barely contained by force fields. A few existed as swarms of smaller entities acting in coordination. Human. The voice came from everywhere at once, a chorus of translation systems converting alien speech into something David's brain could process. "You stand before the Galactic Council to answer for Earth's violation of the Preservation Treaty." David kept his expression neutral. "I'm not aware that Earth signed any preservation treaty." "Your ignorance is not a defense." The speaker was descending from the upper tiers now. As it came closer, David saw it was a being of flowing liquid metal, constantly shifting between forms. The Volsor species, known for their rigid adherence to law. When humanity petitioned for Council membership 40 years ago, you agreed to abide by all standing regulations. "We agreed to follow rules we were informed about," David corrected carefully. "The Preservation Treaty was never mentioned in any orientation materials." "Because you were never supposed to reach the outer reaches," a new voice added. This one came from something that looked like a floating brain surrounded by protective tentacles. "The treaty applies to regions beyond standard colonial expansion zones. Regions your species lacked the technology to access." "Until 3 weeks ago," David said, understanding beginning to dawn. "Our survey teams developed a new drive system. Faster than anything we've used before. It let them reach areas we couldn't get to previously. And what did they find there? The liquid metal being had reached the platform level now, flowing into a vaguely humanoid shape to address David directly. What did your survey teams discover in Sector 793? I don't know, David admitted. The data was classified. I wasn't given clearance. The chamber erupted in overlapping alien speech. Some species sounded angry, others confused, a few seemed almost afraid. David stood silently, waiting for order to be restored. Impossible, the floating brain creature declared. You are Earth's primary council representative. Your government would not send you here without full knowledge of the situation. My government sent me here because I'm expendable, David said bluntly. If this goes badly, losing one ambassador won't cripple Earth's diplomatic corps. If I'd been fully briefed and something went wrong, I might reveal information under pressure that Earth wants kept secret. The liquid metal being studied him with sensors David couldn't begin to understand. Your species plays a dangerous game, human. The Preservation Treaty exists for good reason. What lies in the outer reaches cannot be possessed, controlled, or even safely observed. 43 civilizations have destroyed themselves attempting to claim it. Claim what? David demanded. You keep speaking in riddles. If you want Earth to comply with this treaty, tell me what we're actually dealing with. We cannot. The new voice came from the highest tier, a region David had assumed was empty. Something was descending now, moving with deliberate slowness. As it came closer, David felt his perception struggling to make sense of what he was seeing. The being existed in multiple states simultaneously, solid and liquid and energy all at once. Its form shifting between configurations too quickly for his brain to track. The human asks a fair question, the being said. Its voice carrying an authority that made the entire chamber fall silent. But the answer would violate the very treaty we seek to protect. Knowledge of what exists in the outer reaches is itself dangerous. Simply knowing changes the observer in ways that cannot be reversed. David felt ice in his stomach. You're saying the information itself is hazardous? Precisely. The being had reached the platform now, and David had to fight the urge to step back. Up close, he could see that it wasn't shifting between forms randomly. It was showing him every possible configuration simultaneously, existing as probability rather than certainty. I am Overseer Tal, guardian of the Preservation Treaty. For 70,000 years, I have ensured that no species accesses the outer reaches prematurely. Prematurely? David seized on the word. That implies there's a correct time to access it. When a species reaches certain evolutionary milestones, yes. When their consciousness can withstand exposure without fracturing. Tal's form stabilized slightly, becoming almost solid. Humanity is not ready. Your survey team saw something they should not have seen. Already, we detect changes in their neural patterns. They are becoming something other than human. David's mind raced. If the survey teams were being affected by whatever they'd found, Earth Command needed to know immediately. But he also realized Tal was giving him leverage. If you want Earth to abandon our claims to Sector 793, you'll need to provide medical assistance to our survey teams, David said. Help reverse whatever changes they're experiencing. Impossible. The changes cannot be reversed, only managed. Tal's form rippled. This is why the treaty exists. Once contamination occurs, it spreads. Your survey teams will need to be quarantined permanently. Quarantine where? In the outer reaches. They cannot return to normal space without risking transmission to your general population. David felt anger rising. You're telling me Earth has to abandon 47 people to permanent exile because they discovered something you kept secret from us? We kept it secret to protect you, the liquid metal being interjected. Every species that has attempted to study the outer reaches has either destroyed itself or transformed into something unrecognizable. The Tal Collective existed before we did, guiding younger species away from that fate. Until now, Tal added quietly. Until humanity reached it through innovation rather than inherited knowledge. David looked up at the assembled council, seeing the situation clearly now. They were afraid. Not of what humanity might do, but of what humanity had already done. His species had stumbled into something ancient and dangerous, and now everyone was waiting to see if Earth would survive the exposure or collapse like the 43 civilizations before them. "I need to contact Earth Command," David said. "They need to understand the full situation before making decisions about our survey teams." "Communication with Earth is suspended," Tal replied. "Until this matter is resolved, humanity is isolated. We cannot risk you spreading knowledge of the outer reaches to your homeworld. You're imprisoning an entire planet? We are protecting 946 other civilizations, FR. Potential contamination." Tal's form became almost completely solid, and David saw something like regret in its shifting features. "I take no pleasure in this, human. But the preservation treaty is absolute. No exceptions have been made in 70,000 years. David stood alone on the platform, surrounded by nearly 1,000 alien species, his homeworld cut off from all outside contact, and 47 survey team members trapped in a region of space he couldn't even begin to understand. And then the alarm started. The sound was unlike anything David had ever heard. It bypassed his ears completely, resonating through his bones and teeth, making his vision blur at the edges. Around the chamber, species reacted with immediate panic. The liquid metal being lost cohesion, splashing across the floor. The floating brain creature's tentacles went rigid. Even Overseer Tal's multiform existence flickered, briefly losing its impossible stability. "Breach detected," a mechanical voice announced through translation systems. "Outer reaches contamination spreading to Nexus Prime. Containment failure in medical quarantine Sector 9. David watched as holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing a three-dimensional map of the entire Nexus Prime facility. In one section, colored red and pulsing with warning indicators, something was spreading. It moved like liquid through the station's corridors, but the visual representation kept glitching, showing the contamination in multiple locations simultaneously. "The survey teams," David said, realization hitting him. "You brought them here, to Nexus Prime. Standard quarantine protocol," the liquid metal being said, reforming with visible effort. "Medical facilities here are the most advanced in known space. We believed we could contain them while studying the contamination." "You believed wrong," David shot back. "How many people are in that sector?" 17,000 personnel, Tal replied, its form stabilizing as it focused, representing 43 different species. "If the contamination reaches them before we establish proper barriers, the effects will spread geometrically." David's training kicked in, years of diplomatic crisis management pushing aside panic. "What exactly happens if someone gets contaminated?" "They change," Tal said simply. "Perception alters first. They begin seeing dimensions that do not exist, or rather, dimensions that should not exist in this reality. Then physical changes follow. Cellular structure reorganizes according to rules from outside our universe. Are they dangerous? Unknown. No contaminated individual has ever become violent. But they also cease being recognizable as their original species. They become something else. Something that exists partially outside normal space." The holographic display showed the contamination spreading faster now. It had breached 2 additional sectors, moving in directions that made no geometric sense. David watched as it seemed to flow through walls, but past security barriers and appear in locations it couldn't physically reach from its starting point. "Why isn't it spreading to us?" David asked. "We're all in the same facility. The council chamber exists at a dimensional intersection," Tal explained. "Different physical laws apply here. The contamination cannot spread across dimensional boundaries without assistance. But it's spreading through the rest of the station just fine, because the rest of the station exists in normal space. Unified dimensional structure." Tal's form rippled with what might have been frustration. "We designed it this way deliberately. The council chamber is protected from external threats by existing partially outside reality." David processed that information quickly. "So everyone in the contaminated sectors is trapped. You can't evacuate them without risk of spreading the effect to other areas. Correct. The floating brain creature had recovered enough to speak. Current protocols require complete sterilization of infected zones. We will vent those sectors to space, eliminating all biological matter before the contamination can spread further. You're talking about killing 17,000 people. We are talking about saving 947 civilizations, the creature replied coldly. The mathematics are simple. 17,000 lives versus trillions. David felt rage building. What about the 47 human survey team members? They're in that contaminated zone? You're going to kill them along with everyone else? They are already lost, Tal said, but its tone carried something like sorrow. The moment they entered the outer reaches, their fate was sealed. We hope to learn from them, to understand how the contamination spreads. But we have failed. Then let me try. The words came out before David fully thought them through, but once spoken, he committed to them completely. I'll go into the contaminated zone. Talk to the survey teams. Find out what they actually experienced and what's happening to them. Impossible, the liquid metal being said. You would be contaminated within minutes of exposure. Maybe or maybe not, David looked directly at Tal. You said humanity isn't ready for the outer reaches? But we got there anyway. Our survey team survived exposure long enough to return to normal space. That has to mean something. It means they are unusually resistant to immediate dissolution, Tal replied. Not that they are immune. The contamination is still progressing. It simply progresses more slowly in humans than in other species we have observed. How much more slowly? Tal's form flickered. Unknown. Previous observations involved species who reached the outer reaches deliberately, with preparation and knowledge. Your survey team stumbled in blind. The psychological shock should have destroyed their minds instantly. Instead, they maintained coherence for 3 weeks. 3 weeks is a long time, David pressed. Long enough to establish that humans have some natural resistance. Let me use that. Give me access to the contaminated zone before you sterilize it. A council chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Multiple species shouting objections, others demanding immediate sterilization, a few suggesting even more extreme measures like destroying Nexus Prime entirely to prevent any possibility of contamination spread. David stood silently, waiting for Tal to make a decision. The Overseer was clearly the final authority here, the being whose judgment would determine the fate of 17,000 lives. Your proposal has merit, Tal finally said, but unacceptable risk. If you enter the contaminated zone and fail to maintain coherence, you become another vector for spread. Then give me a kill switch, something that will terminate me if I start showing signs of contamination. We have no such technology that works reliably across dimensional boundaries. David smiled grimly. I wasn't thinking of technology. Send someone with me. Another species with natural resistance or advanced enough to recognize contamination onset. Give them authorization to eliminate me if necessary. The liquid metal being flowed closer. You would accept an executioner as your companion? If it means saving 17,000 lives and getting information that might help humanity, survive whatever we've stumbled into, yes. Tal studied David with perception beyond human understanding. The Overseer's form cycled through configurations that seemed designed to read David's intentions, measuring sincerity against self-preservation instinct. Very well, Tal decided. You will have 1 hour in the contaminated zone. You will be accompanied by Enforcer Kren, a Volsor specialist in containment protocols. He carries authorization to terminate you instantly if contamination symptoms manifest. Understood. David tried not to think about what instant termination might involve. I need access to any information you have about what the survey teams found. Whatever knowledge you're willing to share. Sharing that knowledge risks spreading contamination through information alone. I'm going into a contaminated zone anyway. If knowledge itself is dangerous, I'll be exposed regardless. Tal's form stabilized into something almost solid, and for the first time, David saw what might have been a face. angular, geometric, but recognizably expressing something like respect. You are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. Ambassador Kane, perhaps both. Tall gestured. And a data device materialized in the air before David. This contains limited information about the outer reaches. Read it during your approach to the contaminated zone. Memorize what you can. The device will self-destruct before you enter to prevent potential contamination of the data itself. David caught the device, feeling its weight in his palm. It was warm, almost alive. What should I be looking for when I talk to the survey teams? Coherence, Tal replied. Measure how much of their original humanity remains. If they retain personality, memory, individual identity, then perhaps the contamination is manageable. If they have become something else entirely, then we must accept that humanity's contact with the outer reaches has created a new form of existence we cannot allow to spread, and if it's somewhere in between, then we face a decision no species should have to make, whether to preserve what was or accept what might be. David was escorted from the council chamber by Enforcer Kren, the liquid metal Vulsar who had questioned him earlier. As they walked through corridors that bent space around themselves, David activated the data device and began reading. What he saw made his blood run cold. The outer reaches weren't just a region of space. They were a tier in reality itself, a place where the universe's fundamental structure had broken down billions of years ago. What existed there defied description because it existed outside the framework of describable things. The survey teams hadn't discovered anything. They had been discovered by something that predated the universe itself, something that was now waking up. We approached the contaminated zone, Kren said, his liquid form rippling with tension. Beyond this barrier, I cannot guarantee your safety or sanity. David looked at the sealed doorway ahead, knowing that 17,000 lives waited beyond it, along with 47 humans who had seen something they shouldn't have seen and survived long enough to bring that vision home. Open it, David said. The barrier dissolved. And David stepped into impossible space, following the sound of voices that sang in frequencies human ears were never meant to hear. The first thing David noticed was the light. It came from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, casting shadows in directions that didn't exist. The corridor beyond the barrier looked normal at first glance, standard Nexus Prime architecture with its self-illuminating walls and gravity-neutral floors. But something was fundamentally wrong with the geometry. Corners met at angles that added up to more than they should. Distances seemed to compress and expand based on whether David was looking directly at them or using peripheral vision. Enforcer Kren flowed beside him, his liquid metal form adapting to the strange space more easily than David's solid body. Contamination level is manageable here, the Vulsar said, sensors embedded in his mass analyzing the environment. But it intensifies as we approach the quarantine center. Prepare yourself. Prepare how? David asked, trying not to focus too hard on the way the floor seemed to curve upward while simultaneously remaining flat. By accepting that what you see may not be what exists. The contamination alters perception before it alters reality. Your mind will attempt to make sense of impossible inputs. Do not trust those interpretations. They rounded a corner and found the first contaminated personnel. A being that might have once been from the crystalline shack species, its geometric body structure now flowing and organic in ways that crystal should never flow. It stood in the middle of the corridor, not blocking their path, but not acknowledging their presence either. Its attention seemed focused on something in the walls, or perhaps through the walls, perceiving dimensions David couldn't access. Can it hear us? David asked quietly. Unknown. Contaminated individuals sometimes respond to external stimuli, sometimes do not. There appears to be no pattern to their awareness. David approached the crystalline being carefully. Hello, I'm Ambassador David Kane from Earth. Can you understand me? The being's form rippled. Fractals appeared across its surface, mathematical patterns that seemed to carry meaning David almost grasped before they shifted into new configurations. Then it spoke, voice coming from multiple points in space around its body rather than from any obvious mouth or speaker. Ambassador Earth, human designations. I remember those concepts. I was called Vertex 9 before transformation. I served as medical technician, specialization in radiation-based biology. The being's fractals pulsed. I am more now, Vertex 9 and beyond. I exist in spaces between spaces. What happened to you? David asked, encouraged that the being could still communicate. Contact with truth. The survey teams arrived in medical quarantine exhibiting dimensional instability. Standard protocols required physical examination. I touched one of them. Vertex 9's form expanded slightly, crystalline structure becoming translucent. The knowledge passed through contact. I saw what they had seen. Understood what they had understood. Can you describe it? No. Description requires fixed reference points. What exists in the outer reaches has no fixed reference. It is simultaneity given form, possibility made manifest, the space between cause and effect. Kren's sensors flared. Contamination level increasing? The act of communication may be spreading effects. But I don't feel any different, David protested. Human resistance appears genuine, Kren admitted. Your neural patterns remain stable despite exposure. This is unprecedented. David turned back to Vertex 9. The other contaminated personnel. Are they like you? Still aware, still themselves? Some are. Some have transcended further. Some have dissolved into pure perception, consciousness without anchor. Vertex 9 gestured down the corridor, and David saw more beings now. Dozens of them, representing multiple species, all transformed in unique ways. We are becoming what humanity already is. Bridges between states of existence. What do you mean, what humanity already is? Your species evolved in both spaces. Normal and abnormal. Real and unreal. You exist as contradiction made stable. Vertex 9's fractals arrange themselves into patterns that hurt to perceive. This is why you were never told of the outer reaches. The Council feared what would happen if humanity discovered its own nature. David felt ice in his veins. You're saying humans are already contaminated? That we've always been contaminated? Not contaminated, transformed long ago, before your recorded history. Something from the outer reaches touched your world, changed your ancestors, made them able to exist in states that should be mutually exclusive. Vertex 9 drifted closer, its crystalline form now barely solid. The survey teams did not bring contamination to Nexus Prime, Ambassador. They brought recognition. The outer reaches saw humanity and remembered its children. Kren's liquid form bubbled with agitation. This information contradicts all known data about human evolution. Because the truth was hidden? Preserved in treaties older than the current council. The Overseer knows. Has always known. Vertex 9's form began breaking apart, individual crystals floating independently while maintaining some kind of coordinated awareness. Ask Tal about the first contact protocols. Ask why humanity was quarantined to your solar system for 10,000 years before being allowed council access. Ask what your ancestors agreed to in exchange for that isolation. Before David could respond, alarms sounded throughout the contaminated zone. Different from the earlier breach warning, this alarm carried a tone of finality. Sterilization sequence initiated, a mechanical voice announced. All personnel have 3 minutes to reach designated safe zones before atmospheric purge. They're venting the sector, Kren said. We must leave immediately. Not yet. David looked at the dozens of transformed beings visible in the corridor. Can they be saved? Is there any way to reverse the changes? Reverse implies returning to lesser state, Vertex 9 replied. It's separated crystals now orbiting each other like a miniature solar system. Why would we wish to reverse? We have become what your species was meant to become. What all species eventually become when they stop fearing the spaces between thoughts. 2 minutes to atmospheric purge, the mechanical voice updated. David made a decision. Kren, can you extend your form? Create a barrier? For what purpose? Buy me time to reach the survey teams. The 47 humans in the quarantine center. I need to talk to them before the council kills everyone in this sector. Impossible. Creating such a barrier would require me to expose my entire mass to contamination. I would transform within seconds. Would you still be able to maintain the barrier while transformed? Kren's liquid form stopped moving, freezing in a way David had never seen before. You are asking me to sacrifice my original existence to save beings who may already be lost. I'm asking you to help me find the truth. About humanity, about the outer reaches, about what the Council has been hiding? David met what passed for Kren's eyes, seeing his own reflection distorted in the liquid metal surface. Tal said no contaminated individual has ever shown violence. Maybe that's because contamination doesn't destroy who we are. Maybe it reveals who we could be. 1 minute to atmospheric purge. Kren flowed forward past David, spreading his liquid metal form across the corridor's width like a living wall. I am Enforcer Kren of the Volsar Unity. I have served the Council for 600 years. If this is how my service ends, let it be in pursuit of truth rather than comfortable lies. The liquid metal barrier solidified, becoming a shield between David and the approaching purge sequence. Already, David could see changes beginning. Colors appearing in Kren's silver surface, patterns that resembled Vertex 9's fractals but expressed in metallic medium. David ran deeper into the contaminated zone, following signs toward the medical quarantine center. Around him, transformed beings watched with varying degrees of interest. Some called out encouragement in voices that echoed from impossible directions. Others simply observed, their attention focused on dimensions David couldn't perceive. He reached the quarantine center as the countdown hit 15 seconds. The door was sealed, designed to contain even-dimensional contamination. But the security panel was standard technology. Responding to his council authorization codes, the door opened. Inside, 47 humans sat in a circle. They looked normal at first glance, no obvious physical transformations. But their eyes held something David had never seen in human faces before. They looked at him with recognition that went beyond merely seeing another person. They looked at him like they could see every possibility he represented, every choice he'd ever made and every choice he could make. Ambassador Kane, one of them said. Woman in her 30s, wearing the tattered remains of a survey uniform. You're right on time? We've been waiting for you to arrive. Well, we've been experiencing the moment of your arrival continuously since we returned from the outer reaches. Time works differently when you can see all of it simultaneously. 5 seconds to atmospheric purge. The mechanical voice announced. David looked at the 47 survey team members, at their strange eyes and knowing expressions. Behind him, he could hear Kren's barrier beginning to buckle under the pressure of the approaching purge sequence. Tell me quickly, David demanded. What did you find in the outer reaches? What changed you? The woman smiled. We didn't find anything, Ambassador. We remembered. Remembered what humanity has forgotten. That Earth exists at an intersection point just like this council chamber, but on a planetary scale. Your world has always existed partially in the outer reaches. Every human carries that dual nature in their DNA. Atmospheric purge commencing. David felt the air being sucked from the room, pulled toward vents that would dump them all into space. But the survey team members didn't react, didn't panic or struggle for breath. You can survive this, David realized. The contamination lets you exist without normal biological requirements. We can do more than survive, the woman replied. We can show you. Show the Council. Show the galaxy what humanity has always been capable of when we stop limiting ourselves to single points of existence. She reached out and touched David's hand. The contact was gentle, but the effect was immediate and overwhelming. David's consciousness expanded, perceiving the quarantine center from every angle simultaneously. He saw the past and future of this moment overlapping, experiencing his arrival from the perspectives of all 47 survey team members at once, and through them, he saw the outer reaches. Not as a place, but as a state of being, a way of existing that humanity had evolved to naturally accommodate. The survey teams hadn't been contaminated. They had been awakened. The atmospheric purge couldn't touch them because they existed in spaces the purge couldn't reach. And now David existed in those spaces too, his consciousness spanning dimensions while his body remained anchored in normal space. "Now you understand," the woman said. "Now you can help us show the Council that what they call contamination is actually evolution. The next step for all species brave enough to take it." David pulled his hand back, gasping as his consciousness snapped back to singular perspective. But he retained the memory of what he'd experienced, understanding that now burned in his mind. "The Council will never accept this," he said. "They've built their entire civilization on the principle that the outer reaches must be avoided. Then the Council must change. Or humanity will change it for them." Behind David, Kren's barrier finally collapsed. The Vulsar Enforcer flowed into the quarantine center, his form now a swirling galaxy of liquid metal and crystalline light, transformed but still coherent. "I have seen," Kren's voice echoed from multiple points. "I understand why this was hidden. Why the Preservation Treaty exists. Not to protect species from destruction, but to prevent evolution beyond current Council control." David looked at the transformed beings surrounding him and made the second crucial decision of the day. "Then we need to return to the Council chamber. Show them the truth. Prove that what they call contamination is actually humanity's gift to the galaxy." "They will not listen," Vertex 9 said, its crystalline form now drifting through the walls as if they didn't exist. "They will see only threat to established order." "Maybe," David agreed. "But I didn't come here to maintain established order. I came here to save lives and discover truth. Time to see if the Council values either of those things more than their comfortable lies." The journey back through Nexus Prime was unlike anything David had experienced before. The contaminated zone had spread during his time in quarantine, consuming nearly a third of the station. But it wasn't spreading through infection or contact anymore. It was spreading through choice. Personnel throughout Nexus Prime were volunteering for transformation, seeking out contact with the awakened beings to experience evolution. Firsthand, the Council had lost control of the situation. Completely, David walked through corridors filled with beings in various stages of transformation. Some remained mostly their original form with only subtle changes, eyes that saw in expanded spectrums or limbs that existed partially outside normal space. Others had transformed completely, becoming entities that defied classification while maintaining their core consciousness and identity. Kren flowed beside him, the Vulsar's liquid metal form now containing entire star systems of crystalline light. The Council chamber has sealed itself completely. They are attempting to prevent any contaminated individuals from entering. Can they succeed? Unknown. The transformed exist partially outside normal dimensional boundaries. Conventional barriers may prove ineffective. As if to prove the point, Vertex 9 appeared beside them, having passed through 3 levels of sealed bulkheads without apparent effort. "Ambassador Kane, the Council demands your immediate return. They wish to question you about contamination progression and human involvement." "Human involvement?" David repeated. "They still think we're responsible for this." "They know you are responsible. Not for causing contamination, but for revealing its true nature." Vertex 9's crystalline fragments arranged themselves into patterns that conveyed meaning beyond words. "For 70,000 years, Overseer Tal has maintained the preservation protocols, keeping species away from the outer reaches. Humanity has undone 70,000 years of careful control in 3 weeks." The survey team woman, who had introduced herself as Commander Lisa Park during their brief time in quarantine, materialized from thin air. Her transformation was nearly complete, her body existing in multiple states simultaneously. Solid when directly observed, translucent when seen peripherally, completely absent when not thought about. "The Council chamber barrier is weakening," she reported. "Reality itself is adjusting to accommodate the transformed. We will be able to enter within minutes, should we?" David asked. "If we force entry, the Council will see it as an attack." "They already see us as a threat," Lisa replied. The question is whether they see us as a threat to be destroyed or a truth to be understood. David considered the situation carefully. His diplomatic training emphasized consensus building, finding common ground between opposing positions. But how did you find common ground when one side existed in normal space and the other existed everywhere simultaneously? I'll enter the council chamber alone first, David decided. Give them a chance to hear from someone who has experienced transformation but retained connection to baseline humanity. You have not transformed, Kren observed. You maintain singular existence despite extensive contamination. Exposure. Maybe I'm experiencing transformation differently because I've always existed in both states. David thought about what the survey teams had told him about Earth existing at an intersection point. If humanity naturally accommodates dimensional contradiction, then being fully awakened might look different for us than for other species. Lisa studied him with eyes that saw probability rather than certainty. You're right. I can see it now, perceiving you from multiple angles simultaneously. You exist as a bridge even without conscious transformation. Stable contradiction made manifest. No wonder the Council quarantined Earth for 10,000 years. What do you mean? They were afraid of what would happen if humanity spread before they understood your nature. Afraid you would destabilize established galactic order simply by being yourselves. Lisa's form flickered. And they were right to be afraid. Look what happened the moment humans reached the outer reaches. We recognized it, called to it, became what we were always meant to be. David approached the council chamber barrier. Up close, he could see the dimensional anchors maintaining its stability, complex technology far beyond human understanding. But even these anchors were beginning to fluctuate, reality bending under pressure from the transformed beings gathering outside. Open the barrier, David called out. I'm requesting formal audience as Earth's Council representative. Silence answered him for several seconds. Then Overseer Tal's voice emerged from speakers built into the barrier itself. Ambassador Kane, scans indicate you have been exposed to critical contamination levels. You should have transformed hours ago. Maybe I did transform? Or maybe I've been transformed my entire life without knowing it. David placed his hand against the barrier. Either way, I need to speak with the Council. Lives depend on what happens next. 17,000 lives have been lost already, Tal replied. The atmospheric purge eliminated all personnel who could not escape contaminated zones quickly enough. David felt grief and rage mixing in his chest. You killed them. The very people you claimed to protect, you killed rather than accept what they were becoming. We protected 947 civilizations from potential dissolution. The mathematics were clear. The mathematics were based on fear, not fact. The transformed beings aren't dangerous. They're not trying to spread contamination. They're trying to share evolution. Evolution cannot be shared. It must be earned through generational adaptati. Unless, David said slowly, evolution was always supposed to be shared. Unless the outer reaches represents the next stage for all sentient life, and humanity's role is to help other species reach that stage safely. The barrier flickered. David felt something shift in the dimensional anchors. Tal's certainty wavering for the first time in 70,000 years. You propose a radical reinterpretation of the preservation protocols, Tal said. I propose acknowledging reality instead of hiding from it. Your protocols have failed, Overseer. The contamination is spreading through choice, not infection. Personnel are seeking transformation because they recognize truth when they experience it, or because the contamination alters their judgment, making them believe transformation is desirable when it actually represents existential dissolution. David looked back at the dozens of transformed beings waiting behind him. Lisa with her multiform existence, Kren with his galaxy of living metal, Vertex 9 with crystalline awareness spanning dimensions. They showed no signs of dissolution or loss of identity. They had become more than they were, not less. Let me prove it to you, David said. Open the barrier long enough for me to enter. Examine me directly. Use whatever tests you need to determine if I remain coherent despite contamination exposure. If I've lost my humanity, you'll have evidence supporting your protocols. If I haven't, you'll have to acknowledge that transformation doesn't equal destruction. And if we refuse, then the transformed will enter anyway, and you'll face evolution through force instead of choice. Is that really how you want the next 70,000 years to begin? The barrier dissolved. David stepped through into the council chamber, leaving the transformed beings outside. The massive spherical space was nearly empty now. Most council members had evacuated to their homeworlds, unwilling to remain on a station experiencing dimensional instability. Only the core leadership remained, watching David with varying degrees of fear and hostility. Overseer Tal descended from the highest tier, its multiform existence stable despite the chaos affecting the rest of Nexus Prime. You show remarkable courage. Ambassador Kane, or remarkable foolishness? I've been told that before, David replied. Usually right before something changes everything, indeed. Tal circled David slowly, sensors and perception organs beyond human understanding examining every aspect of his being. You are contaminated. Dimensional markers throughout your cellular structure indicate extensive exposure to outer reaches energies. Yet you maintain coherence, singular consciousness, stable identity? Because humans always had this dual nature. The contamination didn't change me. It awakened parts of me that have always existed. The first contact protocols, the Liquid Metal Council member said, reforming from a puddle he'd become during David's entrance. Tal, he knows. The survey teams told him. Of course they did, Tal replied. Truth cannot be contained once experienced. This is why the protocols existed. David looked between them. What protocols? What was agreed to 10,000 years ago? Tal's form stabilized into something almost solid, and David saw what might have been resignation in its features. When humanity first developed primitive space travel, this council detected your dimensional nature immediately. Earth existed partially in the outer reaches, producing a species that could theoretically survive contact with dimensional chaos. We faced a choice. Let us spread or contain us, David guessed. Destroy you or prepare you, Tal corrected. The council was divided. Some species argued for immediate sterilization of Earth, preventing humans from ever reaching space. Others, myself included, believed humanity might represent a solution to the outer reaches problem rather than a new threat. So, you quarantined Earth, kept us isolated while you studied us from a distance while we prepared both humanity and the galaxy for eventual contact. 10,000 years of observation, manipulation, and gradual introduction. We fed you technology through various means, guided your social development, ensured you evolved in directions that would make integration possible. David felt anger rising. You controlled human history for 10,000 years? We shaped it, gently, minimally, but yes. Tal's form flickered. And we were almost ready for a full integration when your survey teams reached the outer reaches 3 weeks ago. Almost ready to reveal the truth about your nature and your purpose in galactic society. What purpose? To be bridges? To help other species safely experience transformation when they reach appropriate evolutionary milestones. To guide the galaxy toward the next stage of existence without losing the stability and structure that defines current civilization? Lisa's voice echoed through the chamber, despite the barrier that should have prevented it. They want to use us? Make humanity into tools for controlled evolution while they maintain power over who transforms and when. Tal didn't deny it. Order must be preserved. If transformation spreads without guidance, chaos will consume everything the Council has built. David understood the conflict now. Tal wasn't wrong about the need for order. Uncontrolled transformation could destabilize galactic civilization. But the Overseer's solution involved treating humans as tools rather than partners, controlling when and how transformation occurred. There's a middle path, David said. Humanity works with the Council to establish transformation protocols. We help other species understand what to expect, how to maintain coherence during awakening. But we do it as equals, not as tools under your control. Unacceptable, the Liquid Metal Council member said. Humanity has existed for less than 1,000,000 years. You lack the experience to guide galactic policy. But we have experience you lack. Experience existing in dimensional contradiction. Experience maintaining identity while bridging impossible states. David gestured toward the barrier. Look at what's happening on your station. Transformation is spreading because beings recognize truth instinctively. You can't stop it. You can only choose whether to guide it or fight it. Tal was silent for a long moment. Its multiform existence cycling through configurations David recognized as contemplation. Finally, it spoke. The Council will require guarantees. Evidence that humanity can manage this responsibility without destabilizing existing order. Then let's provide that evidence. Open the barrier fully. Allow the transformed to enter peacefully. Let the Council see directly that transformation doesn't equal destruction. And if we see otherwise, then you'll have the opportunity to say you were right all along. But somehow, I don't think that's what will happen. Tal looked at David, at the barrier beyond which dozens of transformed beings waited patiently, at the empty council seats representing species too afraid to face change. Very well, the overseer decided. Lower the barrier. Let us meet evolution face to face and discover whether the next 70,000 years will be defined by growth or entropy. The barrier fell, and the future walked through. The transformed beings entered the council chamber with a grace that belied their impossible nature. Lisa led them, her form shifting between solid and translucent with each step. Behind her came Kren, his liquid metal containing galaxies of light. Vertex 9 drifted through the air, crystalline fragments orbiting each other in patterns that somehow expressed peaceful intent. More followed. Dozens of species represented, each transformed uniquely but all maintaining core identity and consciousness. They arranged themselves in a semicircle before the council leadership. Not threatening but clearly presenting themselves for judgment, Overseer Tal studied them carefully, sensors analyzing every aspect of their transformed state. The other remaining council members did the same. Their various perception methods, creating a network of observation that surrounded the transformed beings like invisible threads. They retain individual consciousness, the liquid metal member admitted reluctantly. Personality markers remain distinct despite dimensional expansion. Memory structures are intact, another council member added, this one resembling a cloud of coordinated insects. They remember their original existence and can articulate the transformation process clearly. But are they still themselves? Tal asked. Or are they new entities wearing the memories of the original beings like costumes? Lisa stepped forward. I can answer that directly, Overseer. I am still Commander Lisa Park, Survey Team Leader, born on Mars Colony, daughter of engineers who helped terraform the polar regions. I remember my childhood, my training, my first space mission. I remember being terrified when our ship entered the outer reaches and reality stopped making sense. She extended her hand, and David watched as it became fully solid, normal human flesh and bone. I can still exist in singular state when needed. The transformation didn't replace my original nature. It supplemented it. But you can also exist in expanded state, Tal observed. Perceiving dimensions others cannot access, existing in multiple locations simultaneously. Yes, both states are me. Neither is more real than the other. Lisa's hand returned to its multiform state. This is what humanity has always been, Overseer. We just didn't know it consciously until we touched the outer reaches and remembered. Kren flowed forward, his transformed voice carrying harmonics that resonated through multiple dimensions. I was Enforcer Kren Vulsar Unity, dedicated to preserving council order through 600 years of service. I'm still that being. But now I understand that order can exist in forms more complex than rigid structure. You were assigned to terminate Ambassador Kane if he showed contamination symptoms, the liquid metal member pointed out. Yet you transformed yourself to protect him. That suggests contamination altered your judgment. It expanded my judgment, Kren replied. allowed me to perceive options I couldn't see before. The decision to transform was mine, made with full awareness of consequences. Contamination does not remove choice. It multiplies it. Vertex 9's crystalline fragments arrange themselves into geometric patterns. The Council fears loss of control. This is understandable. For 70,000 years, the preservation protocols have maintained galactic stability by preventing uncontrolled evolution. But stability without growth is stagnation. And growth without stability is chaos, Tal countered. This is why the protocols exist. Why humanity was quarantined until ready. Ready according to whose judgment? David asked. You decided when humans were prepared for council contact. You planned to decide when we were ready for transformation. You want to make those decisions for every species in the galaxy, because most species cannot make such decisions wisely on their own. Or because you're afraid of what happens when they choose differently than you'd prefer. Tal's multiform existence flickered with something like anger. You accuse me of tyranny, Ambassador Kane, but I have guided this galaxy through millennia of stability. Prevented wars, facilitated cooperation, ensured survival of countless civilizations. My methods have proven effective. For maintaining the galaxy as it is, David agreed, but not for helping it become what it could be. The outer reaches represents evolution, Overseer. The next stage for all sentient life. You can't preserve species from their own potential indefinitely. I can if allowing that potential to manifest destroys everything they have built. Lisa moved to stand beside David, her transformed presence creating subtle distortions in the council chamber's dimensional stability. Then let humanity demonstrate that transformation and civilization can coexist. Grant us provisional authority over transformation protocols. Let us prove that awakening doesn't require abandoning structure. Humanity has existed in council space for 40 years, the Insect Cloud member protested. You lack the experience to manage such responsibility. We have 1,000,000 years of experience existing as dimensional bridges, David countered. We've maintained human civilization while naturally accommodating contradictions that would shatter other species. That's exactly the experience needed for this role. Tal studied the assembled transformed beings, the empty council seats, the station full of personnel choosing transformation despite official warnings. David could see the overseer calculating probabilities, measuring risk against potential benefit. What you propose represents fundamental restructuring of galactic governance, Tal said finally. Humanity moving from new member to leadership role in transformation oversight. The other council species would require extensive persuasion to accept this. Then let's persuade them, David replied. Show them what transformation actually means. Let transformed individuals demonstrate that they can function in galactic society without disrupting established systems. Demonstrate how? Lisa smiled, her form becoming fully solid again. We return to our original positions. Resume our duties. Prove that transformation enhances capability rather than destroying it. I go back to survey work, exploring space with expanded perception that lets me detect phenomena baseline sensors miss. Kren returns to enforcement duties, maintaining order with awareness that spans dimensions. Vertex 9 returns to medical service, the crystalline being added, treating patients with understanding of biology that exists across multiple states simultaneously. Tal was silent for a long moment. Then its multiform existence stabilized into something David recognized as decision-making mode. Very well. I propose a trial period. 1 galactic standard year. Transformed individuals will return to their original roles under observation. If they demonstrate continued coherence and functionality, humanity will be granted provisional authority over transformation protocols for species that choose to pursue awakening. And if we fail? David asked. Then the preservation protocols will be reinstated with absolute enforcement. No species will be allowed to approach the outer reaches. Existing transformed individuals will be quarantined permanently to prevent further spread. It was a risk. A massive gamble on humanity's ability to adapt to a role they'd never been prepared for. But David looked at Lisa and Kren and Vertex 9 and saw beings who had expanded beyond their original limits while maintaining everything that made them themselves. Agreed, David said. 1 year to prove that evolution and civilization can coexist. The council chamber filled with overlapping voices as the remaining members debated the proposal. Some species supported it, recognizing opportunity for eventual transformation of their own people. Others opposed vehemently, seeing only threat to established order. But Tal's authority carried weight accumulated over 70,000 years, and eventually consensus emerged. The trial begins immediately, Tal announced. Ambassador Kane will coordinate with transformed individuals to establish baseline protocols. All voluntary transformation will be permitted under observation. Forced transformation or coercion will result in immediate trial termination. Understood, David replied. The transformed beings dispersed. Returning to their positions throughout Nexus Prime, Lisa and the survey teams departed for Earth, carrying knowledge that would reshape human civilization. Kren resumed enforcement duties, his expanded awareness making him more effective than ever. Vertex 9 returned to medical service, immediately demonstrating ability to treat conditions no baseline physician could address. David remained in the council chamber with Tal, the two of them alone in the massive spherical space. You have changed everything. Ambassador Kane, the overseer said quietly. 70,000 years of careful preservation undone in 3 weeks. Or fulfilled, David suggested. Maybe those 70,000 years of preparation were always leading to this moment, to humanity being ready to guide others toward evolution. Perhaps. Or perhaps we have unleashed something that will destroy the galaxy we have built. Tal's multiform existence cycled through configurations expressing uncertainty. I hope you understand the responsibility you have accepted. If transformation spreads uncontrolled, if it destabilizes the social structures that maintain peace and cooperation, the consequences will be catastrophic, I understand. But I also understand that growth requires risk. Playing it safe forever means never discovering what we could become. David returned to Earth 3 days later, arriving to a planet transformed by knowledge rather than dimensional awakening. The survey teams had shared their experiences broadly, and while few humans had chosen full transformation yet, millions were experimenting with the techniques Lisa had developed for conscious, dimensional bridge activation, small changes at first, enhanced perception allowing scientists to observe quantum phenomena directly, intuitive understanding of probability helping engineers design more efficient systems, artists creating works that existed in multiple interpretive states. Simultaneously, humanity was learning to use abilities they'd always possessed but never recognized. Commander Park met David at the spaceport, her form shifting between states as she moved. The Council is watching closely. We have observers from 43 species monitoring human transformation experiments. Let them watch, David replied. Transparency is part of the deal. We prove transformation works by showing every step of the process. And when other species start demanding access to transformation, then we help them, carefully, with full protocols for maintaining coherence during awakening. David looked up at Earth's sky, seeing the dimensional web that had always connected his homeworld to spaces beyond normal reality. That's our purpose now. Not to be the only transformed species, but to be guides helping others transform safely. Lisa smiled. You sound confident we'll succeed. I am confident. Because humanity has been preparing for this role since we first evolved on a world that existed between dimensions. We just didn't know it until now. 6 months into the trial period, transformation protocols had been established and tested with volunteers from 17 council species. All maintained coherence during awakening. All retained their core identity while gaining expanded perception. The rate of success exceeded even optimistic projections. Overseer Tal visited Earth personally to review the results. The ancient being descended through Earth's atmosphere in a vessel that existed partially outside normal space. coming to rest at the United Earth headquarters where David and his team had established transformation research facilities. Your species has performed admirably, Tal admitted. The protocols work. Transformed individuals maintain social cohesion while expanding capability. I am prepared to recommend full council approval of humanity's transformation oversight role. Thank you, Overseer, David replied. But there's one thing I need to know. The signal. The entity that convinced the Hollows our universe needed recycling. You know who it is, don't you? Tal's multiform existence flickered. That is a matter for another time, Ambassador Kane. No, it's a matter for now. David stood firm despite facing a being with 70,000 years of accumulated power. If someone is still trying to engineer galactic destruction, we need to address it before giving humanity authority over transformation protocols. Tal was silent for a long moment. Then its form stabilized into something resembling resignation. Very well. You have earned the right to know. The signal is not an individual. It is an ideology. A belief held by certain elder species that existence itself is suffering and the only path to peace is universal dissolution. A death cult? With members in the council. With members everywhere. They have existed since before my time, working subtly to engineer conditions that would justify total recycling of this reality. Tal's form brightened slightly, but they have failed. Because transformation offers an alternative. Evolution rather than dissolution. Growth rather than ending. David understood. The trial period wasn't just about proving transformation protocols worked. It was about demonstrating that existence could improve rather than simply endure until eventual heat death. Then we continue, David said. Expand transformation access. Show the galaxy that evolution leads somewhere better than entropy. Indeed. Tal extended something like a hand, and David shook it, feeling the contact between baseline human and ancient transformed entity. Welcome to the true purpose of the Council. Ambassador Kane, not just governing the galaxy as it is, but shepherding it toward what it will become. David looked at his homeworld, seeing billions of humans beginning to understand their true nature, seeing transformation spreading through choice rather than force, evolution guided by wisdom rather than fear. The trial period would end successfully. He had no doubt about that. And when it did, humanity would begin its real work. Not as tools of the Council or weapons against the outer reaches, but as partners in the longest journey any civilization could take, the journey from what was to what could be. One careful transformation at a time, Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.